Hey friends, hopefully seeing my vault doesn't give you too much anxiety, but I am working towards a vault cleaning guide, starting with today's video, the topic of which is triple perk vault of glass weapons. In the first upload of this video, I forgot to mention that if you collect all the vault of glass weapon patterns, that increases the likelihood of getting triple perks. And then because these count as adept weapons, you can upgrade them with spoils of conquest to then go to the crafting table, and you're allowed to change the barrel and the magazine. These are all the weapons that drop. I'll tell you exactly where you can get each of them on the Master Challenge. If you do the Confluxes, you get the Scout. If you do the Oracles, you get the Snipe. If you do the Templar, you get the Hand Cannon. If you do Gatekeeper, you get the Rocket. And if you do Atheon, you get the Machine Gun. And then if you kill Atheon, you can use spoils to buy the shotgun. Starting off in order of greatest to least, we're going to start off with the rocket launcher. And if you want a one and done roll, just to put in your vault, this is what it is. Obviously, you would also have probably impact casing for extra damage. I would say quick launch to get the handling for swap speed, and then a velocity or handling masterwork. But I wouldn't worry about those three. As long as you land these 4 perks, you are effectively saving 1 vault space. In case you haven't seen it, Aegis just dropped a video, PvE Goat, ranking every relevant damage rotation in episode Heresy. And I'm about to go even more in depth on specifically the Hezen Vengeance for endgame content, low mans, speedrunning, contest mode, etc. Check the timestamp on screen now and I go much more in depth. But for now, let's move ahead to Praedyth's Revenge, which has a multi-perk role that covers both PvP and PvE. If you notice, the zoom is 49, that's very similar to Cloud Strike, and then as you crank up the handling, it's arguably better than Cloud Strike because you have more aim assist once you have opening shot kicking in. But if you want the PvE experience, once again, Aegis video goes in depth on it. You can probably craft this if you want to use it for PvE, but if you want to use it for both modes, this could save a vault space or 2. Moving on, corrective measure. I think this is pretty much as optimal as it gets. There is one mention with elemental honing and firefly. Since you get a headshot kill, it makes a solar explosion, which does add on to elemental honing, meaning you can run an arc weapon and easily stack this to ×5 with the right setup. But I think that's asking too much when you can just simply kill 3 adds for a 30% damage bonus. And for the final perk, I like Adrenaline Junkie because once I stack it, I can switch to my other weapon, then immediately switch back to my machine gun and maintain all 5 stacks. In fact, that's very similar to the role I have, so this is going to save a vault space or 2. Redirection did get buffed. Very, very strong, but if I'm using a machine gun, I'm not usually shooting yellow bar and orange bar adds, just the red bars are what I'm killing, so I don't really use a machine gun for boss damage. So although redirection is good, I don't think it's strictly necessary. The 2 perks I do think are strictly necessary are Demolitionist and Destabilizing Rounds. Right now, the artifact essentially gives you destabilizing rounds for free, so you're not going to notice this as much, but as soon as that goes away, you're going to wish you had this perk. Otherwise, I like Demolitionist. Just throw my grenade into the nether, instantly reload my machine gun, and it fits the role. The final perk to talk about is Withering Gaze. Lately, we have been using Lord of Wolves for most of our damage rotations, which means that if we're just using a machine gun in our power slot anyway, might as well provide a source of weaken. This is great for solo content whenever you're running a dungeon since the fire team is 3. And then, of course, if somehow you're doing LFG and someone doesn't bring a tether or a tractor cannon, you could use this. Next up is Fatebringer. I don't think that this is really worth your time because in speedrunning content, you're most likely going to use a shoot to loot explosive Vulpecula, or you're going to farm an unloved if you're trying to use a hand cannon for ad clear, or if you're using a Lucky Pants setup, you're probably going to use Warden's Law. However, if you really do want to use your hand cannon as an ad clear tool or something like that, there are perks that allow it to do that, but I think what stands out the most on this is Osmosis. If you were using something like Geomag Stabilizers, and needed a pseudo arc weapon to start giving you ionic traces, this can do it. In a lot of cases, though, you are taking a slight damage decrease unless you're really optimizing your surges on your boots. So I think this is very, very specific, but worth having. Maybe it will save a roll or two. Then for PvE, Kinetic Tremors is fantastic. Explosive Payload is just free damage. But Unloved also has Explosive Payload kind of baked into it. Then for the final perk, I like Frenzy because it's a no-brainer. You could do crazy stuff with Elemental Honing, but once again, you're using your primary instead of a special or a heavy weapon. Firefly for Solar, I don't know. I really don't recommend this for PvE other than Osmosis. For PvP, however, this could save you a vault space or two. Elephant in the room, is it better than Rose? No. Moving on. Okay, fine, I'll talk about Fatebringer. Once you select all the barrel, magazine, masterwork, etc., this stat package is really, really strong. Once you add Keep Away or Opening Shot, it's phenomenal. And it could be even better with Eye of the Storm. But what I think is unique about this is you can have Opening Shot and Magnificent Howl at the same time and stack up Magnificent Howl stacks to get that easy 2-tap. Or you can go Keep Away, Precision Instrument, have very, very long range hand cannon, or you can go Explosive Payload with Precision Instrument to offset the nerf to Explosive Payload, although it's still pretty bad. Plus, you could also just use Rose. Vision of Confluence. You can skip on this, but I do want to mention two unique things. Number one is Elemental Honing. Since this is an elemental weapon, a solar weapon, it goes from 2.5% to 10% on that second stack. And let's just throw Radiant on to see what 10% even does. This means it can 3-tap tier 8 and under Resilience. So I really don't recommend this perk unless somehow it lands on a kinetic scout rifle in the future. The other one worth mentioning is Paracausal Affinity. 20%, which means you are going to 3-tap. And you can use something like Conditional Finality, since it acts as a light weapon to proc Paracausal Affinity, allowing this to 3-tap. Other than that, I mean, Kill Clip, Heal Clip. I really don't recommend this frame of Scout Rifle unless you have Box Breathing, so it's just going to be a hard skip for me. But if you did want the niche, it's these two perks. There are builds that can enable it to 3-tap more often than not, but you really have to work for it. But if you're going to do that anyway, you're probably just going to craft it, since it's rare that you're going to commit to that loadout in your vault. Finally is Found Verdict. You can have a PvEVP roll. I'm not getting that much value out of 1-2 punch in either of the modes, and much prefer Trench Barrel now. If I'm doing PvP, it's very clearly going to be threat opening. And if I have like Dragon Shadow or Ophidians, Slide Shot's good too. But now in PvE, I'm going Discord with Trench Barrel, which by the way, y'all are sleeping on Discord. This perk is broken in PvE. Basically lets you main 2 special weapons harder than you are already doing that. Then if you're doing solo master lost sectors or something like that and you need to stun a champion, Bolt Shot's right here. So that would be my space saving roll for Found Verdict. But honestly, if you get a PvP roll, just keep it for the future in case this frame ever gets buffed. Right now I think the precision frames are slightly better, but definitely keep this in the back of your head for if they do slight sandbox tuning. So what about the min-max rolls for Hezen Vengeance, if I'm doing contest mode raids, low man, speedrun, self-imposed challenges, etc.? I think you're going to have 2 different Hezen Vengeance in your vault to account for all the possibilities. The first roll is going to have Overflow, Auto-Loading Holster, and Demolitionist with Elemental Honing. The second roll is going to have Overflow, Demolitionist, and Envious Arsenal with Elemental Honing and Bait and Switch. This covers all possibilities in as few rolls as possible. Or at least that's what I thought before I read this comment about the Bipod perk. So just add Bipod to the God roll, and it's even better. The reason for this is because you can swap to the Bipod perk before picking up an ammo brick on the floor to get extra ammo, then swap back to the original perk that you were on. This is highly advantageous in contest mode scenarios where ammo is very scarce. The most likely situation is you have a Cenotaph Warlock or an Aeon player to make ammo bricks all over the room, so if you can just take a second to swap perks in your menu or have a dedicated loadout to ammo scavenging, you get 1 to 2 rockets extra per brick. And in case you needed it, on screen now is the specific ammo pickup numbers. I think that's all I added on this re-upload of the video. I'll add more in the future if anything comes up. This is supposed to be an educational, informative video, so I'm not just gonna put it in the comment section because someone might miss it the first time. Anyway, on with the regularly. One more addition, I wanted to be thorough. Lasting Impression and Explosive Light are not throwaway perks. They're less damage than Elemental Honing and Bait and Switch for less work. I'd estimate you can think of them as a 20% damage bonus for doing nothing you normally wouldn't before a boss phase, and it's worth mentioning that Lasting Impression can be used in ad clearing scenarios or very, very niche setups where you pre-spawn a boss with multiple Lasting Impression rockets or use the damage ticks to build up Starfire or something like that. So just in case in the future we get another Atrek style instant boss melt encounter and everybody's putting Lasting Impression rockets on the floor and shooting them to delay the timer and that's the meta, don't get mad at me if you deleted your Lasting Impression. I'd just take the 1 vault space and gamble that you'll have to craft this if this ever becomes meta, because from a damage perspective, it ain't that hard to proc Elemental Honing or Bait and Switch and upkeep it. It's not that bad. Back to our scheduled programming though. So in the past, if you had a weapon with bipod, if you rallied and then swapped off of bipod, you kept all of the reserve rockets. That is not the case anymore. That does not work. Somebody probably beat me to it in the comment section. Yes, Overflow and bipod does have a synergy with the origin trait. However, if you swap perks, you lose all the overflowed rockets. But what if you didn't swap and just shot 9 rockets in a row at a boss? Forgive the video quality, I did a very basic damage calculation test, and it turns out it's not really that good. The only reason you would run bipod is if you want to use a seasonal artifact synergy, one that might not exist yet, or you could just use a different frame of rocket to have effectively more reserves, but have better damage than bipod on a bad frame. If the goal is to save vault space though, I would just say take the gamble. Bipod is not worth having. Overflow, on the other hand, is absolutely necessary for speedrunning content. Check this out. Super to increase the magazine size, then shoot to loot weapon to pick up 5 rockets in the magazine at once. Considering there hasn't been a single contest activity where we haven't brought Cenotaph or Aeons, that means heavy ammo is always going to be scattered throughout the arena, which means this is a real damage rotation and why I recommend the perk. The next perk I want to talk about is Demolitionist. The first idea some of y'all might have is Starfire Protocol, and I tried that and it wasn't that good. Unless you got a teammate running Verity's Brow, you're not going to get through your entire stack of rockets unless you're doing something crafty like using Forerunner to get the rock to act as an extra grenade. This is assuming that you're the Well-Lock and your team needs a Well of Radiance, but the opportunity cost is of course just run Sanguine Alchemy and have a 3% effective damage boost over this. Even if this rotation wasn't that good though, Prismatic Warlock is the one to run a Demolitionist weapon on. The background footage is going to pre-proc Elemental Honing and then compare it to Bait and Switch, both weapons having Demolitionist with Prismatic grenade setups. I already mentioned Verity's Brow, but also think about like Corded Blades and other seasonal activities where sometimes you pick up a modifier that gives you a faster effective grenade charge, or perhaps a seasonal artifact that has, well, this season for example, has a rocket launcher artifact where you can use a rocket to add clear, which means that you can use your grenade for like restoration looping or pre-spawning adds. But again, the real value of Demolitionist is very niche rotations because we don't know what future bosses are going to be. Like your damage rotation changes entirely if it's a 15-second rotation versus a 30-second rotation. Basically, you want to make sure your reserves are exactly 0 by the time the damage phase ends. And so Demolitionist lets you get really flexible with that, minimizing your downtime and stretching your damage by using abilities instead of bullets. Keep in mind the rotation you just saw in the background is not 100% realistic if you were to try it on the Witness, because the Arcane Needle doesn't hit the boss, it hits immune, you don't even get Radiant. Also, when you're actively damaging a boss while Transcendence up, your grenade might go faster due to a multitude of reasons, so you kind of have to just stare at your grenade icon the entire time to know when the right time is to switch to your rocket and proc Demolitionist. Enough about demo, let's talk about Envious Arsenal. The rotation is very simple. Stick them with Witherhoard and then alternate between special weapon, heavy weapon, special weapon, heavy weapon, until Witherhoard goes away. Now, as to what weapon to use, if you're using a pure solar setup, Legato Slug Shotgun or Keen Thistle Sniper for longer range targets. If you're using Sanguine Alchemy, that gives you 4 times Surge on your solar weapons, so that means you can put triple Surge on your boots for Void to use the unvoiced Slug Shotgun with Redirection and a double damage perk to pump out some of the highest damage in the entire game. So if you made it this far in the vid, you now understand just an unnecessary amount of information on Hezen's Vengeance, and I hope that it saves you 2 or 3 vault spaces. Take care, friends. I will see you in the next one.